The telephone was ringing just as I was getting home, as I was unlocking the door. I bet you know how that is. But this was in a time when the landlines rang long enough for you to actually have a chance to get to the phone before the important caller was sent into voicemail. The caller recognized my voice, and she said, "Oh, Zook, why has no one come to visit me?" That's exactly how she said it. Why has no one come to visit me? We got along because she was an English major too. She was my mother-in-law, Lenore Langdon. And I was a little irritated that she had called because I had just come back from visiting her. We had spent 2 glorious hours on the sunlit balcony reminiscing about our lives together, lives before we had met each other, and reading Emily Dickinson poetry. And she could still recite from memory some of the poetry. She knew it by heart. And so it was so difficult for me to get over my irritation, but I realized that she was no longer remembering anything that had taken place that close to the present moment. It was the first thing to go. My mother-in-law was vanishing in pieces. And I can't imagine, I tried to argue with her and to remind her of the visit, but really, it was to no avail. And I tried to think of that moment and what she had left at that moment. And I could recall 4 things. The last to go was the farthest memory she had from the present, before her disease would take away that too. She could talk about her times together with her siblings when she was a youth with such detail and description that you believed that she was whole. You could try to deceive yourself in believing that she was whole, but that would soon seep away as well. But there was sunlight. One thing we could always do with Lenore is take her for a walk. And one morning we took her for a walk along a tree-lined path. It was just around noontime as the sun was coming over the trees, and it seemed that 1 minute that there was literally a cascade of sunlight that overflowed and flooded on the path that we were at with an uninhibited kind of daylight. And she, in her voice and in her body, quivered with paroxysms of joy. It was as if she had seen the sunrise for the very first time. Yes, as if she was a child. I have to say one thing about Lenore. She never lost her appetite. She loved to eat, and that was great. I don't know if it was the savoring of the taste, of the texture of it, the heat of it, or just the instinctive act of chewing. But she loved doing that. Now, one of the things that was important is when we would have lunch, because she had been an English major and loved language, we would always talk. And one of the things that she retained was conviviality. Now, I like to define conviviality as that miraculous exchange of sociably enjoyable conversation with another person while you're eating something, okay? And that usually becomes the topic, okay? Whatever it is on your mind, and the food usually becomes the topic. By this time, Lenore had been reduced to speaking in gibberish, but she still retained a lilt in her voice and a softness of her voice that made us want to believe she was still there, that her mind was still hers. And she would even laugh at the right places. She still had some kind of attentiveness to behavior that she knew when to laugh, and we would be a chorus comforting her. Yes, that's exactly the right time to laugh. Now, yes, features of identity. This is the hardest question for me to ask. How much of yourself could be taken away and for you to still be there? How much could they take away? And with Lenore, we didn't ever know how much was there. So productive action she retained nothing of our interfacing with her. Was there something about our energy exchange with her that benefited whatever was left inside her? The last episode I want to talk about was Christmas. Christmas was a huge thing in my mother-in-law's family. And one of their great customs was they did slides on everything. Wherever they went, they took photos. So we had a massive collection of their slides. And my wife and I went through the slides and we selected some. We were going to do a slideshow for Lenore and the family for the holiday celebration. And we had picked slides. All of them had her in them, hoping that maybe it could be a mirror to some remembrance of her past. But it included other things, photos of her with her siblings, photos of her at Yosemite and Tuolumne Meadows, which was one of her favorite places, pictures of her with her 2 children, pictures of her with her grandchildren, my kids, and 2 pictures of her with Tom, her husband. And the disease had seemingly divorced him, the most intimate person in her life, the person she had the deepest relationship to, had divorced him from her. So we go through the slideshow, and she just loves seeing the brightness of the images on the wall and the different people. She never said anything about who they were or even herself until we got to one slide of she and Tom were sitting on a boulder. Some river, I guess, at Yosemite was rushing behind them. And she blurted out, "Tom, that's Tom!" Just like that. And she hadn't given that kind of recognition to anybody in, God, years. And so we lingered on that slide. We made it as long as possible. And then we moved on, but then we came back to it again. And we basically begged her to call out his name again, to show a sign of recognition again. So where's the inspiration in this? Well, sunlight. Sunlight gets us up in the morning. Can you imagine living in a day of perpetual night? Why would you get up? Appetite. Appetite. We totally enjoy flavors. We totally enjoy the process of chewing. And appetite gives us drive. It's the coarsest energy you can possibly have. And don't all of us animals savor it? Yeah, we do. Language. We use language without giving it a second of thought, or even a second thought for that matter. It's so facile, it connects us all together. Memory. Can you imagine living without a past? No. Recognition. It's instantaneous, isn't it? Not always. Conviviality. How could we live without it? How could we possibly live without that kind of connection? An identity. That person you call by your name, who you think is yourself, who is almost always with you. So Toastmasters, don't take it for granted, any of those things. And may they never be taken away from you. Carry on.
Remembrance, Part 1. I can't wait till Part 2. I liked it that Vince set up the speech, which very few people actually ever do, to say where their inspiration came from. I thought that was really unique. And where is the inspiration? Where is the challenge? This is what we got. We got a gripping story of his mother-in-law and how she went from being an English major to being a person who was not even necessarily there very often. It was well thought out, and I loved the content, and this was obviously well prepared for. I don't know if you made the time limit or not, but if you didn't, you came very, very close. What was nice, it was clear that both parties were English majors, and that brought about a very subtle element of humor that I thought was really kind of neat. Method of speech. I thought Vince made very good eye contact. Did anyone here feel left out or ignored? I don't think so. I thought you really could have, Vince, I thought you really could have taken your mother-in-law for a walk. And I thought the sun could come beaming down on her. It was an incredibly effective, just in terms of the verbal description that was painted by an English major. But maybe the PE teacher who had to do coaching on the side could have kicked in a little bit. Okay, so I liked the use of the phrase "as if she were a child," because that just reminds you that you start off as a child and it's sort of like bookends, you know? Okay, so before I steal any more from Paul Simon, I thought that you used a very effective pause when you transitioned into the Christmas story. Then, what I thought you could have improved on. I thought you could have started the story with a little bit of a description of trying to figure out what was left of your mother-in-law. Because at the end, you really focused on that quite a bit. And I thought it would have been nice to start with that as well as end with it. Then I thought that you made kind of a lumpy transition, though, to Christmas. I thought you could have done a smoother transition instead of saying, well, and as another point, you know, I thought that there's just could be some way to more effectively transition that. Then the wrap-up. I thought the wrap-up was one of the best wrap-ups I've ever heard. I think you summarized every point you made. The language, the eating, the memory loss, the conviviality, the identity, the challenge. You left us with a challenge. Who leaves us with a challenge? It was wonderful. I appreciated being left with the challenge, and I will attempt to satisfy it. Mr. Toastman.